Israel's defense minister ordered a complete siege of the long blockade Gaza Strip today as it faces battled Palestinian assailants in border towns for a third day. And they also launched retaliatory strikes that hit a mosque and a marketplace in Gaza. The spokesperson for Hamas's military wing has threatened to execute a civilian hostage every time an airstrike hits our civilians in their homes without warning, he said. Hamas is believed to be holding approximately 150 Israelis hostage. Hamas has publicly acknowledged receiving support from Iran. Yesterday, the Iranian president spoke with both the Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader and the Hamas chief, attempting to find some resolution of this crisis that has shocked the entire world. Professor Howard, lots of folks at home over the weekend watching what's happening in Israel play itself out, but a little confused. And even though this, dispute between the Palestinians and Israelites have gone on for decades, help folks at home that may be scratching their heads trying to figure out, why did this dominate my news and my social media feed for the last couple of days? Help them understand what's happening and why it has importance to those of us in the U.S.
Yeah, so I would really recommend to all your listeners, Areva, to take some time out today, this week, to really begin to do some rudimentary sort of learning around this topic. We know that the United States has been a long ally of Israel, and there has been this ongoing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians that has led to lots of bloodshed on multiple sides. It's tied to issues of independence and freedom and occupation of particular parts of Israel. And, part of what you have to do in this situation is, before you really opine, is understand the historical context, understand the different ways in which there have been some atrocities inflicted on both sides. I think this is just the latest form of that. And I think that we have got to understand that this has major ramifications for us in the United States, because we have a significant Jewish population in the U.S. We also have a significant and large Muslim population in this country. And we have folks who are sympathetic to both the Palestinians as well as to the Israelis. And so I've learned in my time to continue to just listen to people who come from multiple perspectives on this issue and try to educate myself on a variety of viewpoints, because it is something that has huge, huge relevance for us here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you say that, because on my way over to the station today, I was talking to a friend, sent me a text, and she's married to a very high-profile entertainer, and she was texting back and forth with this woman, a Jewish female friend of the family, and she said, my friend said she was praying for everyone involved in this horrific attack. And the Jewish woman responded in a very she felt hostile way, basically told her, your prayers aren't really that important. What we need is for your husband, high-profile husband, to come out immediately, Chris, and voice his support for Israel and to condemn the Palestinians. And what my friend and I talked about was, one, she felt that was way too aggressive, first of all. And second of all, we talked about how, when, as Americans, particularly African Americans, when we say exactly what Professor Howard just said, is that there are perspectives on both sides, and you need to understand both sides, that can be triggering for some people in the Jewish community. And some people in the Jewish community would even say, that you're being anti-Semitic because you're suggesting that there is legitimacy on the side of Palestinians. So how do we, as African Americans in particular, navigate this topic? Because it seems like, one wrong turn, you could find yourself in a lot of trouble with the Jewish community.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part right there, is that it seems like no matter what way you choose, you end up losing unless you go full tilt. I'm in support, pro-Israel at that point. And the thing is, there is loss of life on both sides. Atrocities have happened on both sides. Whether or not you like it or not, that is a fact, and we have been watching it go on for decades and decades and decades. I think what's sad about right now, people typically lump everything together, and so we still have to call out Hamas is a militant group within the Palestinian state, but you can't take it out on all Palestinians. We know what type of conflict that's going to escalate at this point. And so, yes, you have people on both sides, but you have people in Israel that are even sympathetic to what's going on in Palestine. You hope that we have a resolution soon. I think for America, this is a horrible situation for us to be in as we continue to spread ourselves thin in how we're trying to support in Ukraine, and now we're getting pulled into this conflict. That is another thing that we definitely have to watch as time goes on, especially with depending on what Beijing and China just decides to do from their terms of things.
Well, we know, Professor Howard, the Republicans have wasted no time blaming President Joe Biden, saying it's because of the efforts that he was engaged in around Iran, trying to, negotiate some kind of deal between Iran and, the Palestinians, that, they felt Hamas, as Chris pointed out, which is a militant group within the Palestinian community, felt emboldened to take this action to make the strike against the Israelites. And so Biden is getting a lot of flack from his Republican colleagues or Republicans elected officials. And then Donald Trump, of course, couldn't be quiet about anything. So he threw his hat into the ring, and he has been stoking fears that this attack that we witnessed over the weekend could take place on U.S. soil. And he's gone back to suggesting that a travel ban, like the one he implemented as president, could stop the violence. So what do you think about the Republicans blaming Biden on one hand, and then Donald Trump taking advantage of this as an opportunity to stoke fears and to talk again about unconstitutional travel bans?
Yeah, this is where I wish we could let the partisan politics kind of fall by the wayside. I think that former President Trump's call for a travel ban is nothing but adding fuel to the fire. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form keep Americans safe. It only stokes fears. It only causes division. It only creates further stereotypes of us versus them mentality. And I also personally don't particularly care for Republicans trying to throw President Biden under the bus. This conflict has gone beyond multiple administrations, both Republican and Democratic. There were lives being lost when President Trump was in office. There were lives being lost when multiple Democrats and Republicans were in office. The thing that's really sad in all this, Areva, is that there have been lots of innocent lives lost. Again, and I hate to use this term on both sides because it sounds so Trumpish, if you will, but there's been lots of innocent civilian lives lost. And that's what you just hate to see. You would hope that at some point in time, we as Americans could come together in a unified manner to say, how do we try to provide some kind of a mediative role in this situation? Because there's a long sordid history tied to issues around, Israelis and some eyes of some not recognizing Palestinians wanting to have their own independent state. So it's a long, complicated, sordid history, but pointing fingers here doesn't seem to help us achieve any viable solutions.
Well, we know Donald Trump loves to point fingers, Chris, and he is trying to revive a part of his 2016 campaign. So he's saying things like, of course, this would never happen if he were president. And the bloodshed, this is a quote from him, the bloodshed and killing that we saw this week will never, ever be allowed to happen on American soil, except for the fact that we have now allowed tens of thousands of probable terrorists into our country. He stated that, he stands strongly with the state of Israel and said to Cheers that he had imposed a strict travel ban to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the U.S. and that he would reimpose the travel ban on terror-afflicted countries. So there's so many things that we know Donald Trump is going to try to make the hallmark of the 2024 election. But Chris, might this again play to those folks that think that Joe Biden is weak on foreign policy, that he's not standing up to terrorists in the way that this tough guy, this toxic masculinity that Donald Trump likes to promote, but that unfortunately resonates with some part of the voters in this country. So, how does Biden need to respond to this toxicity that Donald Trump is spewing, but as again, we know does land with some folks, particularly even those outside of the MAGA crowd.
Well, I think that's one of the problems is Donald Trump has a very large echo chamber that doesn't care to educate itself on what actually is real and what is actually fake. I think for President Biden right now, he has to, choose his words carefully, choose his stands carefully. But at the same time, you cannot allow the former president and really former dictator to keep spewing the lies that he's spewing at this point. I think it's really rich for Donald Trump to talk about violence being incited and coming over to America when literally he incited violence itself